Good evening, everyone. My name is Councilmember Rita Joseph. Welcome to tonight's very, very important conversation about my community here facing this horrible flooding. Every time it rains, it rains on them. So we're here to address this, and the agencies are here. But first, I want to pass it along to my colleague, Assemblymember Bobby Carroll.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Joseph. It's great to be here, and thank you for convening all of us and addressing this head on. We all, just a couple of weeks ago, saw yet again another massive rainstorm where I think parts of Brooklyn got about 8 inches over about 5 or 6 hours. And I was just talking with some folks about Church Avenue and about Beverly Road. I know that Caton Avenue had mass flooding. All in the Kensington, Ditmas Park, Midwood area. And, how we can learn to mitigate this, because these kinds of major rainstorms that are putting much more water down than our sewers can handle at the time being, how we can mitigate the effects to all of our homes, apartment buildings, businesses is really important. And what we can do on the state level, what we can do on the city level, happy to hear from folks. I'm going to have to leave very shortly, but I really want to thank the council member as well as the agencies for coming to hear suggestions and ideas to bring a resolution to this. And I can pass it off to our district manager, Sean Campbell.
Thank you, Assemblymember, and thank you, Council Member, and to your staff too, because I know it was a lot of work to put together. I reviewed some of the past work we've done on this issue and was sort of surprised because you know how time flies. So to find emails and letters from 2010 and to old commissioners who've moved on to other jobs, it has been a work in progress for well over a decade, and it just has become worse as storms have gotten worse and more frequent. So I look forward to hearing about some of the stuff we've talked about before, some of the long-term plans and the aspirational plans and things that we can look forward to in the long run, and then conversations about, and then what in the meantime can we do to mitigate along the way. So thanks to the agencies that are always so responsive and helpful when we call, and look forward to the ongoing conversation. Thanks to the community for always keeping us in the loop and staying hopeful. Thanks.
Thank you to both of you. I just want to build a little context. You already know I'm Councilmember Joseph, but today's flood mitigation is important because we know it affects many of our communities, and most of you know I grew up right there on Stratford Road between Cortelyou and Slocum, and it was flooding then, and I was in middle school. So this has been an ongoing issue for a very, very long time. So today, I'm in a different seat where I can help alleviate some of it, not solve it all at once. I know this is going to be a long-term infrastructure issue, but we know what climate change is doing. It's at our door. So we have to take this seriously, combat the issue more than ever. So I got all the phone calls, all the videos during that rain, and I stayed on the phone. That was one of the times my Director of Constituent Services, we stayed on the phone constantly when all the community was calling to make sure that the reports, making sure the inspectors were out on time, passing the videos all along to the proper agencies as well. So I want to thank the agencies for being here tonight. I look forward to hearing from community members when it comes to your concern regarding the flooding. And I encourage you to write questions also on the card. One of my staffers will be walking around while we have the agencies here to answer some of our questions. What are short-term things that we can do, and what is the long-term goal? Thank you so much. So first, I want to introduce the Department of Environmental Protection. I think Mario Bruno is here. Thank you. Department of Parks and Recreation. Did anyone? Because they're... He's on his way. He texted me. All right, they're on their way. Good. Department of Transportation. They're on their way too? Yep, they're on their way. Hopefully that's them coming through the door. U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Prospect Park Alliance, Community Board 14, and that's our great Sean. So I will pass it along to the agencies. Mario Bruno, thank you.
Hello. Council member, Assembly member, thank you for having us here tonight. I was probably the best person to send from DP because I'm involved with this situation for a long time. I'm with DEP 10 years, but probably started getting involved with the problems of Prospect Park for the first 2 years. I'm Assistant Commissioner for Intergovernmental Affairs. You know, with working with the elected officials and with Sean, you know, this flooding started before we started seeing these, so this flooding problem is old. And I know that because I visited probably one of the worst spots, East 10th Street and Caton. I've been in the residents' houses. I have a lot of their phone numbers. I've talked to you, maybe some of you here. We've talked on the phone. So I know there's a catastrophic flooding problem you have there, and in other parts, in other blocks near there, like it. It's a failure of old infrastructure, both in the street and in the park, that wasn't designed to handle this much water. What DP's done, I can talk about since I've been here, is something we don't normally do, but strictly speaking, we're supposed to only work on our own infrastructure in the street, but Parks and Prospect Park Alliance needed our help. So we've been in there a couple of times, helping them to TV. You know, the park has its own infrastructure, drainage infrastructure, just like the city streets. That belongs to them. That's the responsibility of Parks and the Alliance, just the way the city sewers are our responsibility. But we, you know, we wanted to pitch in because we have the expertise and the means. So we went in there, we TV sewers, we cleaned sewers, we cleared connections, and we did see some relief. I think we did that 2 times in the last five years or so. And then we began looking at, you know, what are the solutions to this? And, you know, in speaking with, you know, residents in the past, some people have said, well, why can't you just build enough sewer capacity to handle this kind of flooding? And I was honest with them. I said, there isn't enough space in the streets to build gray infrastructure that can handle that kind of flooding. And so the approach we have to follow is one that we've pioneered in Staten Island and Queens, and that's building systems based on detention and using natural features that are available. So in Staten Island, along the East Shore and South Shore, where there are, you know, thousands of homes that don't even have storm sewers, we started using the water courses that exist and flow down from the middle of the island to Raritan Bay, and we widen them and we divide them up into with weirs, and we turn these streams into collection ponds. And basically, these ponds take the water from the lateral storm sewers that we built, and instead of building a box sewer that goes out to the ocean, these ponds have much more capacity because they have no top. We can adjust the capacity, and excuse me. So they accept huge amounts of rainwater, and then they allow them to drain slowly. And that's the whole thing. We don't care if the water gets detained. We just don't want it flooding you. So that's the kind of approach we're following, and we've been talking with Parks and the Alliance for the last 2 years, and now we're into, it's not concrete things yet, but understand before we change the drainage system, and you're talking about a huge area, the park, and a huge area around the park, and really, it's, even though it's 2 areas under government, it's really 1 area under drainage. The park's contributing to the stormwater that's in the street, as are the streets themselves. So we're working with Parks and the Prospect Park Alliance to study the area as a whole, and then, you know, using our resources and that resources that Parks and the Alliance can come up with, we're going to build new infrastructure, and I think it's largely going to be based on that kind of detention technique that we use successfully in blue belts. So right now, we're working on hydrologic modeling of the watershed and watercourse in the upland areas to understand the runoff that's happening during the storm event, what's coming, out of the park, and what's coming down like major streets like Coney Island Avenue. We're reviewing detention solutions, which is what I just described, like bluebell ponds within the watercourse in the park to attenuate or detain runoff in a storm event. Prospect Park Alliance has a conceptual capital project for storage and infiltration basins adjacent to the park lake in combination with some upland detention solutions like bluebells that we're evaluating. We're further evaluating both upload and local detention solutions in combination with things like lowering the lake. And finally, we have to, once we look at all these kind of alternatives, we're going to do a cost-benefit analysis to see, based on money, what's going to give us the most impact in terms of reducing the amount of stormwater that you're seeing. So you have to do a study like that before, and what that study does is it creates a skeletal plan for a new drainage system in the area. And from that plan, as I've described to the officers that we work with, from that plan, then DEP can start, and parks can start creating specific capital projects to build the system that we've developed in concept through this study. So studies like this don't happen overnight. And I'm an engineer myself. I'm a mechanical engineer by background, and so you always have to study a problem thoroughly before you proceed with building. So short-term measures like cleaning the park, infrastructure, we're always available to do that. If there are any short-term measures we can identify, we do it. But this is an important long-term measure that's going to create the most mitigation of flooding. So, studies like this usually take 1 to 2 years, and I'm imagining this one's going to be longer than shorter. And happy to answer any questions after the other agencies speak. Or, sure.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Robbie Kieber with EPA Region 2. We cover New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And I'm actually came to listen, to hear what you guys think are some solutions and how we might bring the federal family to help support some of the work you're doing. Thank you guys for inviting us so that we can hear this. This is the way we sort of figure out how to move our work forward. So assistance to the table. We work both at the national level, so we work on national policies that can help drive some of the work that happens in your communities to help you think through how you may want to move forward. For example, right now, the federal government is looking at how to advance resilient building codes and what we can give to our states and localities to help them think about how to move forward with better building codes so that when you get flooded. We also oftentimes provide resources after a flood for how you might, still working, how you might clean up after the flood to keep from mold, what you might do with your, the debris from it. We really try to work on helping communities think about how to plan for debris before a disaster happens so that there's not a lot of debris filling up the already overfilled landfills. So we'll do stuff like that. We have a ton of grants coming out under our current administration. EPA just put out a big environmental justice grant for communities, and I can share these resources with you guys after. If you want to put it up on your website, we can look on ours. I'm really trying to help communities be creative in how they think about solutions and provide solutions to some of these problems that are long-term. We also provide data. A lot of the data that can be useful as communities help decisions comes from the federal government as well as the state and localities. We provide technical assistance to think about how you take that data and turn it into some kind of design or policy that you want in your own community. So there's lots of things we do. But I'm here mostly to listen to what you guys want, how to bring FEMA, HUD, some of the other federal agencies possibly to the table after we hear what you guys want and figure out, which agency is best suited to support this community as they deal with these flooding issues. And I guess they're a really long time flooding issues. So, and we try to keep them from getting worse. And we try to keep communities intact where possible, but we're not, we try to help them think about how to do things differently. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. I'm gonna pass it on.
I'm Christian Zimmerman. I'm from the Prospect Park Alliance. I'm the Vice President for Capital and Landscape Management. I'm also representing the Parks Department tonight, but I'm mainly the Prospect Park Alliance. I've been working in Prospect Park for over 33 years. I've watched the water system fail, work well, not work well. People love the waterfalls, people hate the waterfalls, what it impacts. We're finally at a very good time in trying to solve this problem. Just to give you a little background about our watershed. So if you go to the catch basin beneath the Grand Army Plaza Arch, it drains to our lake. If you go to one corner of the Brooklyn Museum parking lot, it drains to our lake because the system was designed in the 1860s when those areas were not, well, that wasn't the museum, it was just private land, or it was institutional land set aside. We've been mapping that, we watch it, we're trying to solve that problem and eliminate that from all draining into the park. But it was, just to give you quick history, it was designed to take water to the lake because at that historic time, they didn't know if they had enough water to provide for a proper lake. Now we do. So what we're working on, and we've been working on for years actually, but we are now at a good point. We're focusing on the lakeshore waterfront. You've probably heard that as a project. It's about 27 acres. It minimally touches from a little bit north, close to 16th Street entrance on Prospect Park Southwest, all the way down to the Summer House, sometimes Parkside Ocean Avenue entrance. So our goal is to capture all of that water from the path system and the roadways, which currently, as you all know, when we have heavy rains, it's not always the lake. It's actually rarely the lake that floods unless it's really bad. What floods your neighborhood is the water coming down the drive and from 16th Street down, and then peristyle, Grecian shelter, depending on what you call that little structure, that way, and it all goes toward Coney Island Avenue. All of that, and that impermeable pavement doesn't drain, it drains to you. So we want to catch that water and divert it to our lake. So we want to stop that from happening. We've been working with DEP now. I think we have a lot of momentum. That way we're studying the whole watershed. We have their engineering resources looking at that. So what we want to do, as an example, is we want to capture the Long Meadow water, and instead of having it all drain to the lake, stay in that area, percolate down into the ground, and divert it from that system. There's a lot of moving parts in that. We did get money. We had seed money from Council Member Joseph. It's great. We have $3 million. It's tiny, but it's the first step to really draw attention to what we're doing. And our first phase will be redoing the shoreline from the summer house, that's Parkside Ocean Avenue entrance to the landscape in that area, moving south. And we've been working with parks as well and studying that, redoing the shoreline, possibly excavating, making it deeper in the lake bed, and redoing the path system as well. It's not just about the water in the sense, it's also about accessibility. As you all know, from our perspective, you have a beautiful lake shore, you have this path system, it's relatively flat, but it's not accessible to the public because the path system is in such poor condition. So the idea is redoing that as well and actually creating a seasonal floodplain, if you will, for the park. So when the lake swells, the land can absorb the water and then slowly recede. We're looking at a number of different situations or possibilities to stop the water from leaving the park. We actually want the water to stay into the park. We use city water to feed the lake. So when you see that waterfall happening, it's a faucet. It's a big faucet, but it's a faucet, and it's feeding city water. We'd like to reduce that. DEP really wants us to reduce that. So we want to be able to control that more. Currently, we're talking about the future. What we're doing right now, if you look, the water course is turned off. The waterfall is off. We're about a foot low beneath the top of wall. The wall that I look at. There's some places where there isn't a wall, but the measuring wall where when it breaks and it starts flooding your neighborhood, we're about a foot low, which is very large. So you think over 60 acres, 1 foot low. We can take a lot of capacity. We couldn't take, if we had another storm like the current one, or the previous one that would just raised havoc, that wouldn't be enough. But we're slowly drawing it down. We have this balance also because we're habitat. We don't want to have fish kills. So we're in this kind of balance where we need to lower it enough, but not too much so that we create a new problem. But we are actively working. You will see the design. We are doing a conceptual design currently for the entire 27 acres, which you will see eventually. We've paused a little because DEP has gotten involved with us, and there's a lot of ideas coming out. It's like we need to study some of these things that they've brought up. They have the engineering expertise that we don't have, so we're leaning on them. But we're having this whole conceptual design that will expand the lake during storm events, have it recede, collect water during storm events. That's excess water that can be in, I'll say tanks for a lack of a better word. And then all of a sudden when the storm ends, we have all this capacity, we can feed that back into the lake and reduce using city water, which we really want to do as well. There's a lot of moving parts. It is exciting, but our primary thing right now is to stop the water from leaving the park. And if we can always have it, currently, always have the lake low enough that that isn't the problem, that's great. We can't solve the problem of the roadways right now. It's a longer-term capital issue, but we're aware of it, and we want to make that better. And I'm happy to answer any kind of questions regarding that, but that's our goal, is really keep it in the park. It's better for us.
Thank you, and I'm sure my neighbors would love for you to keep the water in the park and out of their homes. And I'm sure, see, they all agree. But I have some good news, though. Listen for the good announcement.
Yeah, a couple of things. I want to, first of all, announce that we do have the meetings. There's a presentation on the Lakeshore project that is on the CB14 website. There's a presentation from DEP on cloudburst management and rainfall ready. And maybe it's silly to give you all context because you're living this, but those resources are there. And then the announcement that I'm excited to share is that CB14 was awarded a Fund for the City of New York Planning Fellow, who's a master's candidate in environmental sciences, and she is going to be working for this academic year, through the year, specifically on flooding issues in our district. So we look forward to reporting out to you and probably engaging with you all along the way.
That's exciting news that we will have someone to help us figure this out. I'm going to start reading some of the questions. You had something? Oh, I brought everybody for you. Do you know what agency they would come?
Thank you. DEP's been for quite a few years now. We've built, I think, over 11 green infrastructure assets. What you're describing sounds like that. The main one we build is a rain garden, which is an enhanced tree pit. They're usually like 20 feet by 5 feet, and they're quite deep. And the bed of the rain garden is filled with engineered fill that absorbs water, and that they usually have 2 curb cuts so that when water is racing down the block along the curb, some of it diverts into the rain garden, and the rain garden carves that flow off from the street so that less water goes into the sewer system. That's not the only type of green infrastructure the city is building. DEP is also building, we build basically a rain garden, but it's under the sidewalk. And that's in areas where we don't want to, the sidewalk is narrow usually, and we don't want to create a tripping hazard or clog off heavy pedestrian traffic. So we build the same structure, but we cap it with a sidewalk so that you know, we don't reduce the sidewalk area. And lastly, which is something new, is the last 2 or 3 years we started building permeable paving, and these are precast concrete plates that are installed along the curb, and we use them to replace asphalt or concrete road. And again, those also have engineered material under them that can absorb the water, and the concrete plates have they're cast with little holes in them or slots, and we actually have to buy special equipment for that. And we have sweepers that have a vacuum in it. So a sweeping truck vacuums those holes so that the water keeps draining. So those are 3 types of basic green infrastructure. But we're building those in this, we call that the right-of-way, the street and the sidewalk. We've already built a lot of green infrastructure around this neighborhood. So it could be that we're starting a new contract. I would just have to get, my colleague Denise Hubbard is here. If you want to give Denise the information on the location and your contact information. Denise, could you just stand up? Raise your hand.
There she is.
And so we can get the details from you. We can get back to you and find out if it is one of our rain gardens we're putting in. Okay? Sure.
I'm gonna start sharing the questions because I have to use the mic because my online audience cannot hear the questions. So the first question is, for streets that flood, should neighbors have a plan for who will help to clear the drains in flooding situations? What are the best practices? Is a garden rake the best equipment for clearing sewer drains, or is there a better tool we should acquire?
What was the name of the tool?
A garden rake.
Cleaning the sewer?
The sewer. What are the recommendations?
Well, there's 2 different things. We clean catch basins. We have special machinery. So when we clean a catch basin, we have a truck with a little crane. The crane picks up the grading, which is really just lying there, but it's very heavy. And then we have a scoop that drops in on a boom, and we clean out the basin. The basin is the first line of defense in our sewer system to keep street trash out of the water and keep it out of the waterways. In most of New York, like in this neighborhood, it's a combined sewer system. So in normal storms, you have a combined sewer that's carrying stormwater and sanitary flow to the wastewater treatment plant that serves your neighborhood. In newer areas that were built after World War II, like Staten Island, the southern coast of Brooklyn and Queens, you see separate sewers. So the treatment plant only gets sanitary flow, and then the separate storm sewers carry the storm water. But the catch basins, they catch all the garbage off the street, and they actually have a hood, a plate on top of the hole where the connecting pipe to the sewer goes. So even if a catch basin is full, it can take on water. Obviously, if you see a clogged catch basin, please call 301. And I use our system, and when people tell me they call 301, I look it up. It goes in there, and we have crews on 24 hours. So it really, the 311 system, I won't speak for other agencies, but I know at DP, it is very functional, so don't be afraid to use it. When we're cleaning sewers, we use a number of different things. First of all, we use like pressure washing. Secondly, we have a machine called a Vactor, which is like a giant vacuum cleaner on a truck. And then we have mechanical systems, things like a rodder, which is like a power equipment that'll knock a heavy clog out of a sewer pipe. So that's what we use to clean our equipment.
Should they clean the top of the catch basement with a rake?
If you see that will prevent flooding. If you see before a storm, leaves on the catch basin, leaves in the curb, it's very helpful to us to us and to your community if you sweep them up. You can use a rake or a broom and a scoop, whatever works for you. I know when I grew up in Brooklyn, when I was a kid, I played a little game. I got my stickball bat, and when I saw the water piling up on the catch basin on my corner, I just poked out a hole in the grating, and we watched the water go down. And sometimes we had to get our Spalding out of the catch basin. That's another story.
I just want to add, it's more than useful. It's the building owner's responsibility to clear sidewalks and then 18 inches into the street from the curb line. And especially in this very leafy time of year, it's important to do that. That's actually a Department of Sanitation answer. But to the extent that your property line intersects with a catch basin or a storm drain, yes, clearing that is the homeowner or building owner responsibility.
Why don't we want more?
Well, when you have, not every storm exceeds the capacity of the sewer. So. But that's why we're here. Right, but the question was in relation to, the normal operation of the sewer. But your point is well taken. That's why the things we're working on with parks and the Alliance and the green infrastructure we built, like blue belts and rain gardens, it's all about either detaining flow or carving it off. Not only, in addition to what I told you about, we also fund green infrastructure on public property. And we've built green infrastructure in schoolyards, in NYCHA facilities. We've funded green roofs, and we even have amount of funding for private companies to put green roofs and other green infrastructure, especially in areas that flood heavily. So we try to be creative with the funding because you're right, we want to keep as much water out of the sewer as possible.
I'm going to repeat
Yes.
the question. Does a co-op consider private, right? I'm repeating for online. When you talk, they can't hear you.
Sure, and if a co-op was improving their roof, they could apply for that grant. The other thing that I know everybody worries about is, and I see it because, I grew up in Brooklyn. Now, you drive through and you can't believe the development, which was always something that was in Manhattan. I'm showing my age, but anyway, well, we have, you can't put up a building that's going to overwhelm the storm system, stormwater system. So what we have is a site connection process. And when a property owner wants to develop something within right, as of right, they hire an engineer who does a site application. And in order to get a site connection application, and that's basically an engineering document that demonstrates that between the size of the connection and all the detention measures they've built on their property, that during storms, that property will not overwhelm the sewer system. And so whenever there's an upzoning, what comes along with it is we revise the drainage plan, and then those buildings that are built are held to a higher standard. In 2012, we changed the stormwater rule that guides that connection process, and we increased the amount of water that big buildings and facilities have to detain by a factor of 10. And last year, almost 2 years ago, we changed the stormwater rule, and now we call it the combined stormwater rule. So if you develop something on property as small as 20,000 square feet, you have to follow this rule. It used to be an acre or half an acre. Secondly, if you create as little as 5,000 square feet of impervious space, like concrete or hard pavers, you have to follow the strictest guidelines. And we encourage them to implement green infrastructure so that they're using things like green roofs, rain gardens, porous paving, anything we can, like I said, to keep water out of the sewer system.
The next question is, does anyone know the level of property damage in dollars amount over the years? Hold on, Sean can answer for us, hold on.
These are DEP claims, 2000 to 2022, $30,530,000. Sorry, $30,530,502, and it's really that last $2 that gets you. That's city DEP.
Right, we haven't had the last figures come in, so it's probably even more.
Also, a lot of claims didn't get paid after big.
Correct. How will the city and state, federal government help individual homeowners with things like floodgates, dry wells, so we can protect our homes, plus our investments, so that you don't have large expenses, have our homeowners insurance? The premiums always go up. I do hear that a lot from constituents. With the flooding, the premiums go up a lot. Anyone want to take that question?
From a federal perspective, I think that's a question that partially FEMA helps individual homeowners. It's not something EPA does, but we do have a lot of guidance. Like when we were just talking about green infrastructure, we have some guidance. The federal government is very keenly aware of this problem, and that is why the president has tasked the full federal family to look at what are ways that we can support our localities and states in thinking about building codes, and then what are the resources we can bring to the table. Every agency is a little bit different. There are some federal agencies that can help private homeowners. We do it through our information. So we have stuff on our website, for example, how to help think about mold pre-disaster, what a homeowner can do for green infrastructure. But this is something that, the federal government is keenly aware of and trying to figure out. I'm actually taking notes to bring back. I work in Region 2. I'm a disaster recovery coordinator there, but I also work nationally on several work groups, and especially with the building codes, because we do know that insurance is becoming a huge problem for homeowners. But I think a lot of the stuff that New York City is doing to protect you, like DEP with the green infrastructure, is really something that around the rest of the country people look at. So it's a problem. We are keenly aware of it. There are some agencies that can support individual homeowners, but it's mostly after storm and it's mostly FEMA, and we all know that that's a challenge. And we are looking at how to think about building codes and helping communities think about how to do it differently. I mean, it's a changing world right now.
I guess I'm the city.
I'm sorry I couldn't give you any more information, but it's like every agency is completely different. But we do help people like DEP. We have a CREAT training, so we help our water utilities think about becoming, climate ready. We do a lot of stuff like that. We do have stuff to help DOTs around the country think about how to be better. But honestly, in New York City, we have amazing agencies doing amazing work.
Thank you. And DP, we have some limited programs that we, help homeowners. We give out thousands of rain barrels every year, which help keep water out of the stormwater system. We started this year to give out sump pumps, and we're going to be doing more giveaways of those. We're in the middle of reordering that because that was very popular. And we gave away thousands of something we started last year, water inflatable flooding barriers to help you, to give you some temporary help coping with, overland flooding that can impact your home.
I can't hear you because remember we're online. I want the people online to hear me as well. That's why I have the questions. But then everybody's shouting out. So tell me your question and then I'll go to you next. How's that? Tell me so I can repeat it to online. When will they know?
We don't do the giveaways. We coordinate with your
We
elected
did
officials and the community
We did
boards.
rain barrier giveaways. We have them at the office. You can call the office and we have them. We'd gladly give them away. That's not a problem. Not a problem at all. Your question? Similar.
I mean, the people in this room have experienced catastrophic flooding and aren't finding out about these giveaways. This is the first.
We send them out weekly. I'm pretty sure some of our colleagues, some of your neighbors that came to our office found out about them. We were giving them away. I still have a ton of them to give away. So that's not a problem. My staff is here. We have cards.
Sure, that sounds great. It's just we haven't heard about it. I haven't heard about it.
Subscribe to everybody's newsletter.
Yeah. And we send out a weekly, if you're not signed in, you signed in and put in an email. Yep. I send out a weekly email with all the information, resources, and all of that. So the next one is, I'm glad to hear that long-term, Prospect Park, get ready for this question. It's for you. I'm glad to hear that long-term solutions to Prospect Park runoff problems are getting started. But on East 10th Street, we can't afford to wait years for solutions. Long-term planning is great, but we know we need a lot of retention and drainage fixes. Are there any projects or part of the projects that can be started on while planning continues, and how can we ensure that funding is in place by the time plans are ready?
So one of the things that we're doing now is making sure the lake is a foot below the top of wall. So if it's 60 acres, that's a very large volume of water. So that's one of the things we're doing. The other thing that we're doing now is, if you're at the parade ground, if you've noticed, we've been replacing all the pavement and we've been adding more drainage in that area. A lot of leaching basins. So when we redid the parade ground, the ball fields, back in late 90s, early 2000s, we put in a whole leaching system in that area because, working with DEP, we didn't want any of the parade ground water to go into the city system on Caton Avenue. So it's that way. So all of that had to stay on site. And we did about the 25 acres, the athletic fields, that all supposed to stay. We did not touch the path in front of the field house. That whole section to Coney Island Avenue was not part of those 25-acre athletic field restorations. We're doing that now. Before this, we get heavy rains. I'm sure you've seen it. It's not just going down Coney Island Avenue, it goes down that pathway. You see that. We're currently installing a leaching system. You'll see these big rings with crushed stone. That is supposed to collect all the water there, stopping it from going to Caton Avenue and staying in the park. So it's small when you think of the impact that you're dealing with, but it is helpful because it is one of the many things that we need to do. So we're doing that now. You see that. They're paving actually, I think tomorrow, in some of the areas. But the whole idea is that was one of the steps that we're working on now.
And one of the questions was, is funding already in place, or you're still looking for funding for this project?
So, well, that project's funded, so we're doing it now.
Funded.
The Lakeshore waterfront that you started funding, we need another 17 million. We may need more than that because with DEP involved, we may be diverting drainage of the park in before it gets to the lake. That's kind of the big thing. That's a new element for us. But the current Lakeshore waterfront, if you go online and see what that is, we're looking at a $20 million project. And we would phase it. Obviously, we're not going to take 27 acres from the public at once. That would be not great. This is another long term, but it's an important piece. Those of you who know the park, there's a drive called Wellhouse Drive. It's next to, there's the little comfort station there. It's by the peninsula. That is 65 feet wide. It's, park's close to traffic except for service vehicles. We don't need that anymore. So we're gonna eliminate 2/3 of that roadway and bring it back into parkland, creating green. We're reducing impermeable pavement from that area. And all that water comes to you eventually too if we have these major storm events. So that's part of that design as well. So there's a lot of things that's down the road, but just to get back to parade ground now, lowering the lake now, those are two things we can do.
I just want to throw out that there is not EPA money. We don't have this kind of money, but FEMA has the BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, RFP out now, and that's where you could get that kind of money. But I would suggest you work with DEP or the City Council, because it is a place where FEMA is trying to get communities to be more resilient to climate change, and so that they don't have to come in and pay afterwards. And sometimes that's what EPA does. We can come in and help and facilitate discussions so you're better prepared. But that is out there right now. I think it's due, I can't remember the exact date. It might be January, but I highly recommend thinking about for that. Lots of, it's through FEMA. It's called BRIC, the Building Resilient, I can't get infrastructure, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, I believe it is. I don't have my phone. Dave has it. Dave, that's what it is, I'm pretty sure. And it's out now. And I can send all those links to people.
Thank you. I think this work, and I think I talked to my neighbors on East 10th, the work cannot wait, so it's gonna have to be a collaborative effort, city, state, and federal, all hands on deck for us to get this done. I don't think they can wait any longer. This is dire. So please share the information with us, so across agencies and across city government, we can make sure that we're addressing the need as fast. Because everyone is here tonight, that means they can no longer wait. It's urgent. Some business owners on Cortelli Road, Church Avenue did work that prevented flooding in their businesses. Building basements, is there government funding for other business property owners to address this? Copy their approach. I'm sure there's always gonna be funding. I'm gonna reach out to small businesses. That's what I'm writing my notes down to find out from the commissioner if there's anything, or DP or HPD as well, to see if there's anything in that realm that support that. I think I should get another mic. You're gonna have to speak up, or you're gonna have to tell me the question so I can tell the people online. Absolutely, always looking for a model to duplicate. What are DEP's plan to address the flooding that occurs from 4th Avenue near Carroll Street to the Gowanus Canal?
I don't have specific information, but we're working on a project to address the flooding because that's a place with unfavorably low elevation. It's a natural basin, and so anytime there's excessive rain, it floods badly. So we're working on a project specifically for that corner. We've already built along 4th Avenue nearby high-level storm sewers, which are additional stormwater only sewers, large box sewers to car flow off of, that comes down 4th Avenue. So we've taken some measures, but now we're working on a project that's specifically for that corner.
Thank you. I'm getting this is a long one. Extensive paving after street repairs, after the pitch so that the water flows to the other side of the street using only the 2 catch basins. In addition to the broken curb, it does not contain water in the street flow. Between DEP and DOT, we can't get the corrected corner, Lewis at Stratford Road, water back down the street towards Coney Island, or flooding down Lewis Place driveways. How do we get the attention to finally get this right? Also, my plumber states that the high rainfall prevents water from my pipe into the basement from flowing, even though I have a backflow valve of water in my house. I can't escape. I'm so sorry this is happening. When I've called 311 about flooding, I'm told that water needs to stand puddle for 3 days. That is correct. Unfortunately, I don't get that. For it to be considered an issue. Yes, I did. I got several phone calls in the office, and that's what they said. They said that they were told the water has to stand there for 3 days before they consider it an issue. If it goes away, it's not an issue.
Well, DEP is responsible for the drainage system. So when a city street is rebuilt under a capital project, the curb heights, the locations of the drain, and the pitch of the street are all engineered by DDC, who builds new streets or rebuilt streets, so that most of the water is either going into the catch basins or flowing towards a catch basin on another block. Once as you know, once DOT does maintenance paving, the pitch of the street may change. If they add height to the roadway, then the curb reveal disappears. If a curb is broken or too low, it'll create ponding. And also that ponding rule is a DOT rule. It's not a DEP rule. Although we get the ponding complaint, if it's not an issue with our infrastructure, we refer it to DOT when we get a complaint in 311. When pothole complaints come in, whether they're sinkholes or potholes, those go, and also street hardware, those go to DOT. They do the first inspection, and then DOT will make a referral either to DEP, or if it's a Con Edison manhole or somebody else's infrastructure.
The question was, who should they call about this problem?
Who should they call? When they call 311, they're told that the water has to stand. I had a constituent from Rugby Road call me. He took a picture, and he said DEP told him it would take 3 days. The water has to stand still for 3 days in order for them to consider it an issue.
That's a DOT rule, so you gotta call DOT. Yes. About the ponding rule is a DOT rule. Ponding is usually caused by a defect in pavement. DOT paves. Call DOT. I'm not in charge of DOT.
I invited them here tonight. As you can see, they are not here.
I'm sorry.
Why are the parks, DP, this question is for you, why are parks getting priority? Are the Prospect Park Alliance actions going to receive the flooding in the residents? How is that going to resolved? Why is Prospect Park, parks? Why are you getting priority? Why is it a priority?
For us to
to receive, are the Parks Alliance actions going to receive flooding in residents? Why are you a priority?
I don't know if we're a priority over neighborhoods. I wouldn't necessarily say that. Our job is to advocate for Prospect Park. That's what we've been doing. And we've seen this problem of the fact that stormwater leaves the park and impacts the neighborhood. It also means that when the water leaves the park, it's not in the lake, which also helps us reduce consumption of city water, which everyone wants too. So what we think long-term is, yes, it helps the park, but it also helps the neighborhoods, because if we can reduce our impact from stormwater in the neighborhood, that's a benefit. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Also, we provide why we're advocating for this portion of the park now as well, is if you just walk around that path system next to the lake, it's in horrible condition. People go to the park to recuperate, recreate, relax. It is a place, you know from COVID, where did a lot of people go? It's the only place you could go. So it's important for your well-being as well, everybody's well-being, but it doesn't function as best as it can and should. So, and you know, I've filmed the storms. Like I said, I've been here 33 years. I go out in the rainstorms and I film them. I've sent them to DEP. I sent this years ago. I show the problems. I say, we have to stop this, because I've watched everything flush out to Coney Island Avenue, you know, Prospect Park Southwest, the Park West Drive, the Lake Drive, all of that. It all funnels in. I can send those again for you to see if you wanted to see them. It's just really bad. So why are we getting money? That's one of the main reasons we're getting the money, is stop this. We need to restore this part of the park and also reduce this impact or eliminate it. We'd like to keep it. So it's not an either or in our eyes. We think it's good for everyone, cumulatively.
DP, you have a question about the cold burst program. Where is Flatbush in the prioritization of neighborhoods? The implementation of the 4 initial cold burst hubs is just a beginning. So how long is Flatbush as a flooding hub really going to wait for an implemented solution?
The cloud burst, what the council member's question referred to, or the question the council member referred to, was the cloud burst initiative. And that's where we focus on an area that has, unfavorable elevation, is in a natural basin where water's coming at it from all sides, and we build implementations of green infrastructure, maybe not just one kind, maybe a combination. This is something that's been done in Europe successfully. It's not for every it's not the solution to every flooding problem and location, but what we do is we look at areas that are, we have a stormwater flooding map you can go online and find, and the blue areas on the map, you can see those are the low-lying areas that are most vulnerable. And some of the areas that get flooded here are not on them because that's not really the flooding problem you have. But areas that are low-lying and they flood naturally, we implement Cloudburst. It's a brand new program. I mean, we will have to get back to the council member with an answer of whether or not there's an implementation of Cloudburst coming to Flatbush.
And I'm sure they're curious. This one is a lot. Flooding in the streets, the basement, the trees are not pruned. I get calls a lot about that. When it is supposed to be, I had to call repeatedly, someone said. They also have an issue with squirrels. I don't know, I can take this one. Okay, there's one for DP, okay. It says they're tired of DP only handling their system. The pipe that goes from the main line to my home is my responsibility, but with it underground, how am I supposed to maintain it? To check for rust, cracks, and main line if it's closer to the other side of the street, so my pipe is longer. Not fair.
I hear you, but, you know, when the builder that first built your house, the builder built the connecting pipes for your water and your sewer, and when they sold that house to the first owner, those became their property, and it's just the way New York City operates under the law. We call them sewer and water service lines. They're your responsibility. In other towns, they're not, but in New York City, as far as I know, that's always been the case. What we do do is that if you have our protection plan under our vendor AWR, our insurance plan, which covers mainly the most basic reasons why you could get a broken water line or a broken sewer line. But with that said, if you have a lead line, and houses that were built probably before I was born often do, and it's broken, AWR goes out and finds your lead water line is broken, they replace the whole line. That's part of the insurance. Sewer lines, though, the best thing to do is if you get root problems, kind of just time, don't wait until your sewer backs up, try it, and you'll be aware of how often you get root incursion, and bring in, a vendor who can do, what Roto-Rooter does. A lot of plumbers do that. A good resource for all homeowners, and we work very close with them, and they give you free advice about, owning a home. They have low-cost loans for emergency construction. If you have to replace a broken water or sewer line, that's Neighborhood Housing Services of Flatbush, and they're obviously you can Google them, but they're great partners of ours, and we do a lot of events with them.
Thank you. They're here with us tonight. The solution offered by parks like the lakefront redevelopment seem to only address the lake runoff. The roads and the paths are always significant, of course. They can use as runoffs as well. Can a surge retention tank be built in the middle of the park circle to catch the water flowing out of the park before it goes into the city sewer and overwhelms them? Diverting this water may prevent our sewers from backing up.
If I understand that right, we don't want it to get to Park Circle. I guess the whole idea is that we're looking at many solutions, but one of them would be having storage tanks. There's a number of different solutions. That would be in the park. It wouldn't ever, the idea is we don't need to have it go to Park Circle. We want it all in the park. So storage capacity, which we're analyzing, is like how much volume, how significant, what the significant volumes of water that we need. And we're looking at trying to figure out what we need to do to stop a 100-year storm from impacting the neighborhoods. So we're not doing a 10-year storm or a 50-year storm. With DEP, we're looking at a 50-year storm, but we're also saying, well, in a 100-year storm, does that mean we have to drop the lake 4 feet to stop a 100-year storm from impacting? So we're asking those hard questions. Now, obviously, we're not gonna drop it 4 feet, but we're asking those questions. But we don't want it to go to Park Circle. We want it to stay inside Prospect Park proper. So that's our goal.
And they talked about some of the roads are dilapidated inside the park. Is that also part of the problem? Some of the roads inside the paths, inside the park are also dilapidated. Is that part of the problem?
Yeah, so that is the majority of the problem. I know everyone wants to blame the lake, but I've been here a long time watching the lake. So under the normal system, the Office of Emergency Management, we have a storm coming. We're one of the 5 lakes in the city. They say, lower your lake. So we start drawing our lake down generally 2 weeks before. This one, no one seemed to think that it was gonna be that big of a storm. It was clearly a misjudgment.
I've been living under a rock.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I'm telling you what we didn't get that message. So we lowered it, but we were lowering it under our normal system. But usually we get a message, we drop it, and then they say, okay, we have one outflow, we shut that valve, we stop impacting the neighborhood. So we drop it to a certain level and then close that so we don't impact the outside of into the neighborhoods. That's the general system that we do. What you're getting a lot of is the park drives, which are, 80 feet wide, 90 feet wide in some areas. All that stormwater, many of those catch basins are actually seepage basins. They're like leaching basins that don't function properly. So you're just getting all that water running toward Park Circle. In addition, you get Prospect Park Southwest running toward your area. If you go to Parkside Avenue, talk about that, from Parade Place to Coney Island Avenue, there is not one catch basin, not one. It all goes that way. So I'm saying you have 4 major roadways all converging in one spot, and it's called Park Circle.
Just to that point, and I know I can't be perfect, but putting additional catch basins there, is that something that DEP thinks would be a mitigating factor, or because that is there is a conspicuous lack of catch basins on these like very vast spans of like church.
Well, you can't put catch basins there if there's no sewer. So yeah. So, but given that this is an area-wide study, I think that's something that's going to be looked at. I know we were talking about Parkside as well as Caden, how drainage can be improved, but obviously focusing on what Parks is doing is detaining water in the park, but we're involved because we're also looking at improving the infrastructure outside of the park and in a wide area.
So what we're doing in our design that we're looking at is, as the water's traveling down from 16th Street, inside the park, 16th Street entrance down, and it just keeps running, we want to divert that water, collect it, and move it into the landscape. So as an example, what we're studying is we have a bridle path. It doesn't look like much of a bridle path, but historically there was a bridle path all along the perimeter of the lake. We need to reconstruct that. We want to take the opportunity, not just for the horses, but really runners, recreation use it as well. Take the opportunity to dig that entire thing up, put under drainage in there for a collection point. And if you think about that, that's a very long line running from 16th Street all the way to Parkside Ocean Avenue. And that's generally between 10 and 18 feet wide and then deep. So you're talking about storage capacity. We haven't calculated it yet. These are the ideas that we're looking at. But if you take all that water from the drive and instead of having it going out to Park Circle, we pipe it, so we collect it and we move it into that area, reducing the erosion, but reducing that water impact. Those are the things that we're looking at inside the park with DEP, with Parks, saying, let's just collect all of that water. So that's what we're doing, and we'll do it in a phased way, but because we can't take up all the park, we can't take that much of a park away from the public, but also we don't have the funding. But as we get the funding, that's the things that we're looking at doing. So it's not, and we can take that water, turn off the faucet, and after the storm, feed that back into the lake. And let that be the restoration of the water body. Clean it. So.
I have another one. Heavy rain causes constant flooding on Glenwood Road and East 21st Street, Farragut and between East 23rd and 24. Calls 311 and DEP have not resolved issue. Basements are flooded, and this has happened since October of 2021, since Hurricane Ida. DEP.
I got it. Yeah, so as the question mentioned, this has been happening since 2021. Well, even before then, we were seeing an increased incidence of microbursts, which are small storms that hit one area of the city and dump an excessive amount of water on there. So as someone said earlier, most city sewers, the older city sewers handle 1 inch per hour. In the last 10 years, we're building sewers that handle 1.5, and then more recently, probably just before Ida, we went up to 1.75 inches in Newkirk when we're doing redoing sewers, and now I think they're looking at even more. But you're never going to be able to build infrastructure in the whole city that can handle 3 inches an hour. So what that's going to mean over time is that the city's got to change, the design of homes has to change. It's probably a bad idea to build homes with basements where there's groundwater problems like there are in parts of Brooklyn. It's a terrible problem in Southeast Queens. And it's probably a bad idea to have combined sewers. Because houses that don't have combined sewers, unless there's a problem in the sanitary sewer, they're not impacted this way. So our biggest problem is we're living with probably sewer designs that predate all these problems. Now, as time goes on, the city is going to probably replace more of the combined sewer system with separate sewers. Also find ways to help. Like when new homes are built, they should probably, if they're in a combined sewer area, they should probably be required to have what they call a backwater valve. A backwater valve can be effective to protect you from that kind of flooding, flooding that exceeds the sewer system capacity. Remember, if the sewer on your block was designed for 1 inch an hour, and that was built at around the same time as your homes, your roof drains were probably designed for 1 inch per hour or something around that. So if the sewer system is getting surcharged by rates that exceed that, probably so is your roof drain, which in most people's houses ties into the same line that your sanitary waste goes out in. So a good idea is looking at how do you separate that. And one easy way is a backwater valve, which isolates the inside of your house from your roof and from your service line. And the city is studying ways, because there's limitations under state law, maybe that'll change. The city's studying ways how it can fund a program to help people put in backwater valves and sump pumps, because it's very common in other states, it's very common in cities in Canada.
Here's another one. The soil in Prospect Park extremely compacted due to increased usage beginning during the pandemic. It does not absorb rainwater, which runs right off. Are there any plans to mitigate this?
Yes. So as part of the Lakeshore Waterfront Project, it is from the shoreline out into the water to the roadway. We will be working on decompacting that. That's an ongoing issue for the park because we get so much use. I mean, you can see so one of the things that we started working on with DEP last week before, is having them look at the Long Meadow with us. So if you are a dog walker and you're at the north end of the Long Meadow, there's just heavy use, there's heavy compaction. Olmsted and Vaux, sorry to get into history, but Olmsted and Vaux designed the park as a sponge park. It was one of the first sponge parks really created. They didn't call it that, but the Long Meadow was supposed to absorb the water. So in heavy rains, you would see these ponding areas, and then through time it would just absorb and then go to the water course because that's what they wanted it to do. This last storm showed how much compaction there was because from almost Grand Army Plaza, the north end of the Long Meadow, down through into the ravine, that was a river. We've documented, we've filmed, and there was at least 1 foot to almost 2 feet of water going down Rocky Pass. And that was all from the Long Meadow because it can't absorb the water anymore because the compaction is so great. So one of the things we're looking at, in addition to wanting to reconstruct the lawn, which would aerate the soil, is to create storage capacity at the top instead of at the bottom. Everyone's been focusing on the bottom, like we are, but we want to restore, that whole area as well. but we're also looking at the middle and the top. How do we collect the Nethermead water? How do we collect the Longmeadow water before it hits the lake and floods you? So we really are looking at all of these things.
The DEP map showing locations of rain garden has rain gardens anywhere. There are no rain gardens anywhere in our neighborhood. How do we designate locations that could use rain gardens? DEP has told us that they do not take requests for rain gardens. How does that work? How do you determine where to put rain gardens?
The rain garden program, probably before Ida, a lot of DPs our planning revolved around meeting with environmental goals as they increased. Goals, you know, we're always given new goals by that are handed down from EPA to DEC to improve the quality of the water bodies by keeping sewage out of them. Now, as I described, most of the city has a combined sewer system. When that sewer system becomes full, when the sewer's full and the plant can't handle any more water, the system has multiple outfalls built into it. And each outfall is protected by a regulator, which is a passive device. It's basically a chamber. When the water rises to a certain level, it spills over a wall called a weir, and then it gets redirected to a pipe, and then a mixture of raw sewage and stormwater starts being pumped into the water bodies around us. So we've been doing a lot of work over the past 20 years. We've reduced combined sewer overflows by about 80%, but we had, I guess it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we signed a consent decree with a consent order with New York State DEC. Part of it was to build these rain gardens. So all the funding for the rain gardens was focused on reducing placing them in locations where we would cut the amount of stormwater in areas that were most likely to impact and cause combined sewer overflows. It wasn't because we were trying to reduce flooding. That's a side benefit. That was our mandate. So we built 11,000 of those. That program right now, there's no option in it to request rain garden locations. Building rain gardens or any green infrastructure is actually really in the right of way in a sidewalk and street. It's really, really hard. I was involved with some of the first contracts, and we build through contracts with DDC and Economic Development Corporation too. And the problem is that you need an area under the design we were following. We wanted to put them in areas that were put in before a catch basin that was a major contributor to combined sewer overflows, number one. Number two, the geotechnical properties of the soil under the pavement had to be right. So we'd core drill. If it wasn't good, it got rejected. Number three, we were also surveying for underground infrastructure. If there's too much in the way, we can't build them. So typically, in a contract where we aim to build 2,000 rain gardens, we had to go through about 2,000 sites. So that's how difficult it is. You really can't build them in Manhattan because either there's too much infrastructure or in a lot of places you have bedrock or you have landfill, because a lot of lower Manhattan's built in landfill. Staten Island, it's a giant ball of clay, another bad place for rain gardens. So that program's been focused on Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx almost entirely. Now we've been in conversations with the state. We've been asking for more flexibility to build rain gardens in areas that will help with flooding. And we've reorganized and put more funding into our green infrastructure unit. And they have a full-blown maintenance crew that goes out and cleans as often as they can. So that's where we're at. That's how the rain garden program and green infrastructure currently works. But as time goes on, we're going to be using our resources to build green infrastructure implementations where they needed to reduce flooding, and less so probably where they needed to reduce combined sewer overflows.
So I'm going to do one follow-up. So how about someone asked the question, there was talk of converting boulevards to absorbing areas. Is it possible to make yards and driveways into absorbing areas?
Well, that goes back to the right now the rules for like where you have to follow the stormwater rule. That's for property over 20,000 square feet. Now, my understanding is DEC is probably going to change that. So even a plot to build a house like maybe 3,000 or 4,000 square feet is going to fall under that rule. But right now, it's property over 20,000 square feet. They really have to use those implementations. So they use porous pavement. They use rain gardens, swales, green roofs. They can also use gray infrastructure like the detention tanks. But if you have the square footage, green infrastructure implementations are really the best way to meet with our stormwater rule.
Joanne from CB14. I think I'm gonna start sharing out the mic. I could get up and shake my leg a little. Hold on.
Hi, thank you very much, Councilmember. So I just want to point out that a lot of the area in question is surrounded by 2 truck routes. So when I hear you talk about putting catch basins on Caton Avenue, we also have to consider the abuse of the road by 53-foot trucks and how those trucks are warping the pavement, which is also going to affect how the water is going to flow into existing and new catch basins. So this has to be a little bit bigger, larger project, considering because of the way that the area is situated, because of the combined sewer system, is it still appropriate to have 2 state truck routes that are literally a block away and surrounding a lot? And this is just all hypothetical, but I'm saying it's also part of the thinking when we're trying to look for solutions. Thank you.
I'm gonna be sharing the mic.
Good evening. I'm Sophia Francis from Cortellia Early Childhood Centers on Cortellia Road. And this has been a big problem for quite some time. And I'm hearing what everyone's saying in regards to the catch basins not being able to take a certain amount of time, a certain amount of rain per minute and all this thing. This has been a problem. We've been on that road since 1970, I'm 70 what? I'm born in 77, since 1978. I can remember as a little girl and my parents telling me not to go into the basement and them trying to keep, everything under control on our businesses on Cortellia Road. So I just don't know what the solution is for everyone. And I love my Cortellia Road Merchants Association. We've been there for quite some time. But when I see new people who move in who haven't been there for 40 odd years, I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh gosh, they don't know what's gonna happen in the basement. It doesn't happen in our basement, but we have put certain things in place. So I think what Jan was saying is very important. I think if maybe FTC and Robin and everyone, if they can help us facilitate, and I'm just talking for the business owners, I know I can't help the house situations, but if we can help the new business owners who come into the Strip and want to be there and don't kind of like, oh yeah, you didn't know that was going to happen. If we can kind of give them some nows, like what can I do now? Because even when you have the sub pumps in the basement and when you do all these things to the backyard work that we've done so things don't come into the building, but what happened the other day in all of my 46 years, I've never seen it come through the front door of the school. Like it was coming in the front door. So it wasn't coming up through the basement as it usually was, it was coming through the front door. So what is the temporary solution? And I think as business owners, maybe we should just sit down and talk. Maybe everyone needs a 5-pound, like the plaster bucket, like stop the drains when things are coming up through kitchen sinks and you don't know why. They need those action steps to save their inventory in the basement. So I just think if that type of meeting can be had, it would help some of these, businesses that haven't been there for 40 years. I really do feel for them. So if we can figure out some action steps now, that would help keep Cortellia, a thriving district.
Thank you, and I do think maybe the small businesses do need to have a little summit and figure it out and support each other in that way. So Robin, I will be working with you. So we have an FYI, backflows protection, even floodgates aren't enough if you're still, come on down.
I was just going to say that one of the problems I think we've had in this area, and I know we've had on East 10th a lot, but it probably is happening elsewhere, is that even if you put in infinite backflow stuff, I know people have floodgates, I know people have done really high ejector pump things that doesn't come through the drains anymore. When you get these like big floods and it's street flooding it wasn't just during the rain, but 9 hours after with DEP pumping it out. I just is more of a PSA a little bit, like individual solutions, they work to a point, but they're not going to be the whole thing. We really need to make sure that all these agencies are coordinating, because if you've got your street flooded a foot, 2 feet, whatever, it's coming in your walls, whether or not you have the best everything. So we need to have these like much bigger discussions all the time in addition to just doing things. And we definitely should share knowledge, but it's going to have like a systematic solution as well. Thank you.
Any answers? Are you taking notes?
I'm just acknowledging what you're saying, because I know there's blocks in this area where the street flooding, even before Ida, was so bad that the water was going over the curbs and into the basement entrance of your homes, and that basements were being flooded both by that and the sewer backup. So it's definitely a problem. Again, we're doing a big order of inflatable rain barriers, so maybe those barriers can help with the flooding that gets in from the front of houses. And, we'll be happy to work with the council member and the community board, the other elected officials, to do, like the kind of flooding town halls where we give things away, like the barriers and pumps and rain barrels.
On Kermit Place, we've been told that by DEP that there is a sizing issue with our sewer line. Is there any way this could be studied further? Understand not all sewer lines can be replaced, but what about sewer lines that are too small now? That's for you, DEP.
No, I know there's an issue in Kermit Place. I don't know if a bigger sewer was the only solution. I know it's something that our capital unit has begun to study, Denise. So they're studying that and looking at how a capital project could help. If the solution is they can increase the size of the local sewer, they will do it. But we'll follow up with your office about that specific question.
So, Marianne?
So there is something that could be done now, like in the next few weeks. I really appreciate what the gentleman from Parks talked about, catching the water upstream, but the PS217 playground is also under Parks jurisdiction. And I've looked at every single tree pit in the PS217 playground, hard as rock. Water doesn't go through. Same thing outside my apartment building, hard as rock. If everyone, with the park's assistance, could make the tree pits permeable, put some plants there, I know that the terrain doesn't allow always to have green infrastructure, but even having some permeable tree pits would help the local flooding. That's something we all could do, and parks and city government should help us. Make the tree pits permeable, plant some native plants, make the place more, our neighborhoods more livable.
Is that something possible, Parks?
I think I can take that back to the Parks Department, and I don't know why they can't do that. I know when they work on playgrounds outside, sorry, this is an explanation. I only work in Prospect Park, but but in representing them, I know in dealing with their playgrounds, neighborhood parks, they are working on the infrastructure too and trying to make it more permeable. But I can go to forestry actually and say specifically regarding tree pits, because you're right, they are hard as rock. And if we could, that little bit, if we do that over and over again and make that more permeable, it is one step closer to solving the problem.
I'm really interested because
will
I
do that.
just gave them a bunch of money to do the playground over. So now you perked my curiosity, and I just planted 200 new trees in the district, and I'm about to do another round of tree planting in the district. So that's going to be something I'm very interested in to see. So this new playground, the one you see outside, is about to get done over, completely brand new for the students in this school. So I'm interested in that. Come on down.
I mean, we do a neighborhood cleanup twice a year, and it would be really great if we could partner with parks and get community volunteers who are interested in loosening up, and maybe if you guys could even provide the equipment and, you know, some training that day. We probably could go block by block with different volunteers from different neighborhood associations, from different resident associations. So I'd be really interested in seeing that happen, and I'd be glad to be your partner.
Marianne.
So if every kid or every class could adopt a tree pit and make it permeable and with a little grass, wouldn't that be great?
Sure would. Tyrone? This is Tyrone from NHS that you referenced earlier.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to make a statement from the person who left from the Cortelia Merchants Association, and also this may be relevant to people in the audience, that the state passed a law sometime either last year or the year before, in which that if a landlord is renting a property, they must inform the tenant, whether it's commercial or residential, of the flood history. Now, they are working for it in home sale situations. That has, there's been some lobbying against that for a number of years. There is a bill in the state, to try to inform new home buyers of a property of the flood history, but for anyone whether you're a business or a tenant, the landlord must inform you of the flood history. So I just want to put that out there if anyone, is concerned about that.
Hi. Oh, God. Hi, I'm here from my neighborhood, which is South Midwood. It was, some blocks were mentioned earlier as blocks that have a lot of problems with the catch basins flooding, the recent big rain, and in general. So I'm going back directly from here to go to a Zoom call. There's a group that formed about 2 to 3 years ago in my neighborhood called the Pollinators. And what we do is we're trying to develop eco corridors on the sidewalk strips in front of everyone's homes and along the mall on Glenwood Road, but in particular to plant, not just aerate the soil, but to plant flowers and shrubs that attract pollinating insects and birds, so that we're increasing the number of very important insect life that spread and create lovely, very important fertilization of living things in our neighborhoods, and increase the whole cycle of life. So this fits right in with what we're talking about, because the talk tonight is on flood abatement in our own properties, and what we can do on our own if we have houses with front yards and backyards. And if we don't, if we all live in sidewalks that have those strips that have tree pits that can be aerated and planted. So, and I don't know about how many if we can make rain gardens, but I know in my house, my land, many years ago, I planted just a very small area right near one of the drain pipes that come off my roof to distribute the water so that it just doesn't hit the ground and then go into the sidewalk. So a lot of people can do this in their own neighborhoods. learn more about it and to share information.
Thank you. There was a recent flooding at a church, a historical landmark church on Dorchester and 19th Street, and it turns out that the catch basin was completely clogged. It's the Flatbush Tompkins Congregational Church on Dorchester. It was completely the damage is estimated to be about $1 million in repairs. So what can we do when a catch basin is completely clogged and something like this happens?
Most of the time when catch basins fail like that, and our crew goes out, we found that, it's the problem we talked about earlier, that the leaves, once leaves cover, the leaves and debris cover a catch basin, it stops working. Enough water gets on it or snow, and the catch basin stops working. So, we do not, DEP's not funded to prevent that from happening. We don't have that kind of resources, so we clean the inside of the catch basin because obviously for sanitary reasons, we don't want to leave garbage sit there, and also because it improves the flow. As long as the grading is clear, the catch basin will take in water because the tube that goes from the basin, the pipe that goes from the basin to the sewer is protected from a plate so that none of the garbage that floats in the rising water can go in there and clog it up. Now sometimes because people abuse the catch basin and dirt gets in there or concrete, that's a different story. But a normally functioning catch basin, that shouldn't happen. It's possible there was a different kind of clog, but if we get the information from the specific corner, we'll investigate it and see if there's anything wrong with a council member.
Okay, thank you. Can the city put check valves to block water from going into the home of homeowners?
Well, DP has restrictions that, we're very limited under the law. There's one general area of state law, and then there's one specific to DP as a revenue collecting agency. Most of the laws that made us from charging for water by frontage to using meters and making us operate more like a utility were baked into state law. So, we can't fund that, but we are studying how it could be funded, whether it's outside funding or changes in state law. But we are studying that.
Okay, so there are a lot of trees that are very, very good about flooding, keeping flooding at bay. How do we get, I'm assuming that the park is planting those, how do we get more of those trees on the list of allowed city trees so that we can plant them around?
They will work with my office on the type of trees that we plant. Thank you. Oh, this question is for me. There's a lot of construction planning for Coney Island Avenue. They have to get approved by City Council. How's this going to handle? Actually, if it's as of right, they don't ever talk to me. If it's a rezoning, then they talk to the council member. But if they're building as of right and it's in the correct zoning, they don't ever have to say one word to me. All I see is walk by and I see the building go up. If they're looking to rezone, then they talk to the council member. And I only have one project that's rezoning on Coney Island, one. My friend. You didn't tell me your name.
My name's Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Good to meet you. Okay, just a few points and questions. So I've heard you say from DEP that people who have check valves don't necessarily experience this level of flooding. And I just want to say that we do have a functioning check valve, didn't have any backflow from the sewer, and still had 4 feet of water in our basement. I just wanted to I'm sure you understand that, but
I was talking about combined sewer backups.
Yeah.
I was specifically talking about sewer backups.
Okay, understood.
That's what it's for. I didn't say it's for anything else.
Okay, so we prevented that with the check valve. That's good. But we still have 4 feet of water in our basement, which causes catastrophic damage to our mechanical systems and stuff like that, right? So just to be clear. So one thing I've noticed sort of around town is that people will install, like, I guess they're called like ejector sumps, but basically sumps that pump straight out onto the street. Because when the mains are overwhelmed, there's nowhere for the sumps to go. And that's the case in our particular situation. So we're basically just circulating water in our basement when our sumps are operating during this storm. And my understanding is that these ejector sumps are actually illegal. So what I'm asking is, if we install one, will we be punished? Because it seems like it's a pretty simple question, I guess.
We have a small unit in our wastewater treatment division. They're industrial waste inspectors, and what they're like the guards of the sewer. It's a really, really small unit, and we have some bad actors, concrete plants that, in spite of fine after fine, are still letting concrete water and concrete into the sewer system. So we're really focused. We don't have the means to go after individual homeowners that way. And if someone's pumping their house out because they, I'm not saying we don't enforce the law, but if someone's pumping their house out because they got flooded, we have people who are bad actors that we're trying to go after. So that is just not our priority. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. So actually, I'm a little bit, as someone who's been flooded twice in 2 years or 3 years, like everybody here, or a lot of people here, I support the parks in their effort to try and stop the water from flooding my neighbors on East 10th Street and Caton Avenue. And I agree with the long-term plan. My question, though, is what's a realistic time frame here? Because the 100-year storm is going to come once every 2 or 3 years. And we know that. So the check valve, as the gentleman said, I don't have one. I have a sump pump. I'm debating getting it because you have to maintain it, and it's really not the simplest thing to do. What is a realistic time frame for DEP or the city to think about changing the combined sewer system? Because our problem below Prospect Park is not the water from the park, it's the backflow from the sewer that happens instantaneously, and there's nothing we can do about that, assuming a check valve is unsuccessful. What's a realistic time frame for us to look for? And I also want to thank the councilwoman for everything she's doing on this, very responsive to my emails, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is probably what you would want to call a more landlocked area of Brooklyn. But if you saw the map of the drainage area you're in, because like I said, when I was talking about combined sewer overflows, there's a big area where you're in a big area that empties into one outfall that's on a coastline somewhere. So all those sewers between that area and you would have to be built out to implement that as a solution, as opposed to what we're looking at, which is trying to just protect you from the water and keep it in the park. And I can tell you, seeing the blue belts built in Staten Island and Queens, they work. They don't work. I mean, once a blue belt is built, like the amount of flooding complaints in an area that once had no storm sewers, it just drops, because it's just a great way of handling it. It's not. There could be more catastrophic storms with climate change we haven't seen yet, because that's happened 2 or 3 times now in the past few years. But if you take a trip out to Staten Island, look up the Mid-Island Blue Belt, and you could see just the tremendous storage area that it has. What they're going to do in the park's not going to be identical, but it's going to work like that. It's really the best solution on one hand, and fortunately, we've done it elsewhere. So we think we're following a good approach with our partners at parks.
My last question right there. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Sally Bowman. Many of you know me from the neighborhood, from the 10 years I was at FTC. Love you guys. The last few years, though, I've been in a nonprofit called Metro Flood Defense, and so we're very involved in coastal resiliency and the multiple forms of flooding, very involved with the HAT study, all of that. But the things that I wanted to bring up here today were, one, I think it's super important for everyone in the audience, and also I really appreciate everything everyone here has been saying, but when people are talking about September 29th was a bit of a surprise, I'd like to remind everyone that it was a king tide, it was the remnant of a tropical storm, and it was one of the last supermoons of 2023. And so what this means is we have extreme high tides. And as the gentleman from DEP mentioned, with a combined overflow, when we have sewers, when the system can't handle what it has, it goes straight out to the overflows, and we have tides like this, it can't fully go out into the waterways. And so I think it's really important when we talk about being surprised, especially our community leaders and our agency leaders, it's really important to think about what is going on, and maybe it shouldn't have been such a surprise that a rain event a cloudburst event could create flooding of this type with those other factors, as opposed to a cloudburst on any other day at any other time. So I think that's super important, and we saw that with Ida as well. The other thing, and this is something that I'd really love, like Sean and Rita, for you guys to champion, and I'm part of the Waterfront Alliance, and I'm part of Rise to Resiliency and Rebuild to Design and all those things, which might not mean a lot to people here, but I know you guys know what that is, and we're really pushing this, is the city's emergency system. And so we got texts, well, I should say some of my family members got texts, others got nothing, 2 hours after feet of water were in our home. And that is just not acceptable. We all know how many basement apartments there are. We all know you've got to rush down there. You've got to save your mechanicals. You've got to save other things. The business owner who mentioned putting the concrete bag down, if you're getting the warning hours after the disaster has struck, that's a failure of the system. And I know that no one in this room is in charge of that system, but I would really ask that everyone in this room make a call for improvements in that system, because people die, and that's not okay. We're talking about property in our homes and money, but human life is so important. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I live on East 10th. It's really great that you have given $3 million to start the process. But you said 17 million or more is needed. My question is, who is going to get the rest? Maybe there's a grant from the federal government, maybe. But who's going to get the rest, and who's going to make it a priority that we can solve this? Because Sean was saying it's been going on for more than 10 years. Right, yeah. So it's been going on. So who is going to make it a priority that it has to be fixed now? Because this is a city park visited by the whole city and people who visit the city. But it's not fair that the neighbors of the park have to pay for the water, have to pay for all of that, to handle the water. When is the city gonna pay to handle its own water? I mean, who's going to lead the charge?
Well, one good thing is the park has 3 moms, so there's Councilmember Hanif, Councilmember Hudson, and myself. So we will champion, I've been a champion of green space and parks, so we will continue to work with you to make sure, but I'm also gonna not carry this all by myself, to bring in my state and my federal partners to make sure they're carrying their fair share of it as well. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I've lived in the neighborhood 22 years, and we moved in when the lobby flooded at the corner of Stratford and Church. But I did want to thank you, Councilwoman, and congratulations. I'm very glad you got reelected, but it's really important to have an educator in your position, because this flood was the first time that, I have been afraid and on the streets from flooding in our neighborhood, but I had to get dry clothes to take to a school. The schools are flooding. kids can't get to schools. And my lay person, I really appreciate hearing you guys and that you're working together, because this is a problem we have together. So I don't want this to become divisive and slow it down, but your study is necessary, but the timeline is really hard to accept. But it's affecting people. Parents can't get to work if they can't get their kids to school safely. And on that day, on the 29th, I took dry clothes to the brand new school right here on Coney Island Avenue, and I watched 2 accidents happen with cars. And I took my daughter at 7 a.m. to the traffic circle before the acute flooding at 7 a.m. And sorry, I said that twice, but I took her because I didn't want to put her in the subway because those flooded, but I put her in a car when cars were starting to have trouble driving and school buses. So I know you guys understand this, but the timeline to study it is, there needs to be something quicker. Because I want to know, does it take people getting killed because of the flood? I don't know how to speed it up, but the work that you're going to do with someone that can study all the green, what did you call them, Mr. Bruno? Green infrastructure, I'm 100%. I go to the park every day. I'm a film technician. I work all over the 5 boroughs, and that green infrastructure makes a big difference. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I think we're in it together. So I want to know when the next meeting is. Because I'm here because of my neighbor, Olinda Provence, and her mother has been like the mother of the block. That's why I'm here, because I do think we're in it together. And a lot of people came, there were business owners who came but had to leave. So, because Church Avenue flooding is like, it floods every business every time it rains.
Thank you so much.
Hello. My only issue is now the water bill is increased because of the flood. The water bill, because the water comes in and goes back out, so we got an increase. Because of the flood, yeah.
The water, the sewer
waste,
system
yeah.
and the drinking water system are totally separate sets of pipes.
So the meter is not reading what goes out?
No. No, all we read is what comes in. And then most of what you pay, DP is probably, I think, the 3rd or 4th largest energy consumer. So most of your water bill pays for the energy we consume to turn the sewage into clean water so we can put it back in the waterways.
Okay, so the water that came in during the flood,
there's no meter on the sewer
did not
system.
read it. It didn't.
I hope not, because then that's mixing with your drinking water.
Okay.
No, it goes. There's no meter on the sewer system. Just on the incoming side of the drinking water, your drinking water line. In fact, it only measures what's passed through. If you have a leak on your line in the street after the meter, it doesn't read. It's only the leaks on the other side in your house or any other plumbing you might have on your property that it could lead. So you don't have to be concerned about that.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
This is on YouTube. If anyone need the rain barriers, Brian is here. We can set up for you to pick them up in my office. I met with the group in my office, and I'll make sure that we keep in touch. My permit has expired for the building, so I'm gonna close it out, but we will be in touch with the team leaders, and we'll continue this conversation. Councilmember Lewis could not make it, so on behalf of Councilmember Lewis, I'm gonna say thank you, Assembly Member. Yeah, the side exit has the Devante. The alarms are gonna go off. Someone has to log them for safety. On behalf of Councilmember Lewis, Assemblymember Bobby Carroll, Senator Kevin Parker, so therefore, thank you.